call it the 3 core strategies that we think
Mm-hmm.
everybody should have. That first one is Maven. The second one is the buy box targeting strategy. I actively want to target the buy box. I want to at least match. I might want to, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, you can beat the price, but at least match it. And then that third strategy is really a liquidation strategy.
What do you, as a previous seller and now in the game of repricing, what do you believe are the factors that genuinely just go into winning the buy box?
Repricing on Amazon is probably one of the most important things when it comes to reselling products on Amazon. It's something that I use and really helps me win the buy box majority of the time on all of my listings. This is what helps me be competitive. Now, I had the chance to speak with Dillon, the founder of Aura, and that's the software I've been using for the last few years. And we really got under the hood to understand how it works and how I can even implement newer strategies to make sure I'm winning more of the buy box. We really talked about strategies around bringing in new products and workflow of what you should do in like the first 2 weeks and the first month and the second month and so on. We really talked about Maven, their AI, and how it works and what it really looks at. Is it trying to win more of the buy box, or is it trying to be more profitable? We talk about that. We also talk about when the buy box is suppressed. How is Maven going to find you, the buy box, to turn it back on? And we also talk about if your listings aren't selling, right? So what do you do to give it a boost to be able to revive it, right? These are all super, super interesting things that we talked about. I want you to watch it. Go down below this video. You can see segments, obviously, of what we talk about. But hey, if you're a veteran or if you're a brand new seller, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of value out of this. So let's go and watch the interview.
Okay, we have Dillon here in front of us, ready to rock, and we're going to talk a little bit about Aura and his Repricer, and that's the Repricer that I've been using for the last, 3-4 years, if not longer. I'm excited to get into this and talk to you more about it, Dillon. Why don't you start off with a bit of an introduction and tell us more about Aura and yourself, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So I've spent a third of my life in the Amazon seller space in some way, shape, or form. So that's exciting. So I've seen a lot of trends, and having been a seller, we've used a lot of software, and we have found that with our skill set, with my co-founder being technical, actually having a computer science degree, we're able to build the software I'd always wanted. And so we initially launched with VinDriveCRM.com, which was kind of something we wanted just for ourselves doing wholesale. Quickly pivoted over into something we thought was far more technically challenging and far more impactful. And that's when we jumped into repricing, because at the time, and it's still true to this day, a lot of repricing tools are overwhelming, don't perform incredibly well, really complicated to get set up. And we wanted to completely flip that on its head.
Mm-hmm. I got you. And I can attest to that because, as I always say to you, whenever I see you, I'm like, this repricer is just so pretty. It's so easy to use. And obviously, we'll talk more about that. But, I would say the first time I ever heard your voice, I should say, was on your podcast, Wholesale Made Easy. When I was first starting out, I listened to literally every episode there. And of course, you were talking about Aura as a repricer there. And at the end of the day, it was a great place to start as a beginner seller. Are you still recording any episodes for that podcast?
We're not. So we were one of the first people to create wholesale focused content back in the day. So we had the first Facebook group solely focused on wholesale. It was free. We did live sourcing for 2.5 years every Tuesday.
Wow.
We started the first wholesale focused podcast, which is Wholesale Made Easy. But everything we've done, we wanted it to be evergreen content. I think once you cover the foundations, which a lot of people don't do, they really want to get into the subtle tactics and things like that. Um, Once you focus on the foundations, you find that all that's left are the tactics that are kind of going to come and go away pretty fast. So we intentionally stopped recording that once we hit all those foundations. For us, we really wanted to focus on what are the things that people are not talking about when we're talking wholesale. Because at the end of the day, you don't learn wholesale. That's not a skill.
Mm-hmm.
What you're really doing is sales. And once people understand that, they start to succeed with wholesale. So we
Yeah.
really wanted to kind of shift people's perspective, get them to understand how to do it correctly, and really have that be evergreen content that would last for years.
Mm-hmm. Epic. And that's exactly what it was and still is. I'm pretty sure I started listening to it few years after you kind of started it. So it was definitely beneficial. And for anyone listening who is a beginner seller, definitely check out that podcast because there's lots of things there that are still foundational to building your business. So epic, epic. So yeah, you started off there. I mean, that was like, probably 6 years ago now, if not longer. And now you've successfully built Aura. That's your main focus. And I'd like to go right in with a super hard question. And this has to do with winning the buy box, right? As a reseller, everything is about the buy box. That's the core of it. And so using Repricer is really like our main purpose with a Repricer is to win more of the buy box. So based on your research, and not necessarily specific to repricing just yet, what do you, as a previous seller and now in the game of repricing, what do you believe are the factors that genuinely just go into winning the buy
Mm-hmm.
box?
There's no clear answer because it changes, right? When we saw as a society going into COVID, we saw that FBA started to become less weighted than merchant fulfilled offers. That's now reverted. So there is no clear algorithm. That's what's hard about what we do. It's a black box at the end of the day. And so for us, we took a different stance on this. We said, okay, well, if we can't ever truly know what's going to happen, and by the way, every listing is different than the next. And so there is no, here's how it works. It's really subtle nuances. So when we built our AI Maven, we wanted to solve that problem, that complexity problem. And we said, okay, well, what if we took a step back and designed something that could understand the nuances in real time per listing, per competitor, and then utilize that real-time information to make better pricing decisions. So there is no great answer, which is, kind of why we exist, right? If there was a clear answer, I don't think repricing tools would really exist in the way they do today.
Yeah, I actually like that answer. So you're looking at each listing specifically and now using AI to determine what is potentially creating more wins in the buy box, and you kind of lean towards that. Is that correct?
That's correct. And even when we're talking the buy box, right, we covet the buy box, but the reality of it is the buy box is a little overvalued in some cases, right? So we have been flipping things on its head lately. The framework we've kind of created is, we call it the life cycle. So every one of you, including your competition, is in a different phase of the same life cycle of your product. So when you first come into stock, you're pretty conservative. You care more about profitability and profit margin. As time goes on, you become more aggressive because you care less about profitability, more about velocity. You want things to come back. You want to recover your capital. You want to avoid long-term storage fees. And so if you think about it through that lens, you start to understand what really matters here. Well, it's profit margin and velocity. These are the two levers you have. These two levers oppose one another. But what's interesting is with Maven, it actually doesn't target the buy box. What it targets is the optimal price. And that optimal price is the balance between sales velocity and profit margin. So when we're talking that life cycle, there's really like 3 phases. In that first phase, we recommend you start with Maven because it's going to help you get the most money and not negate velocity, because you still need both. And what's interesting is that optimal price fluctuates in real time, right? And so we're able to actually get sales above the buy box in some cases. And so it's not necessarily that you should solely target the buy box. There are cases where you should. So the way this life cycle, this 3-phase approach works is you start with Maven, finding that optimal price. Then you become a little bit more aggressive, in which case you are now targeting the buy box. And you might match it, as simple as that. Again, you're starting to focus more on velocity. And then the last phase there is liquidation. You're willing to go to break even, 0% ROI to at least get your capital back. And so I think the nuances of what we do is important, because a lot of times we want to be very simplistic and be like, just get the buy box, get the buy box. That's not necessarily true, because sometimes we can lower your buy box percentage by, let's say, 20%, but your margin went up 10%. That's a good thing in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify for everyone, Maven is the name of the AI tool or AI algorithm that you guys have. So I'd love to dive deeper into that. We have Maven, right? And you mentioned that's a great place to start. Let's say you have a brand new listing, it's your first time selling on the listing, or you just restocked on the listing. Trigger Maven, right?
Exactly.
other strategies do you guys also have within Aura that I could use outside of Maven potentially, or even just within Maven?
Yeah.
We can maybe talk about different setups of Maven.
Yeah, for sure. So we have two categories, right? We have AI and rule-based. So you're always going to be in one of those two categories. Maven's the only AI that we currently have. And here's what's cool about it. Your rule-based strategies have anywhere from 15 to 30 settings, depending on the company you're with, that you have to set yourself when you go rule-based. Yeah, there's some, pre-configured stuff, but it's still settings. Maven has one. Maven just needs to know, how do you want to set your min values? It's going to dynamically calculate your max price. It's going to figure out the optimal price in real time. You're not having to go in and create all these subtle tweaks. And so whereas with rule-based, you might need 5 to 7 variations of that, Maven, you don't. And so the only time you need multiple versions of Maven is if you want a different min value. And we always recommend to automatically set that using ROI, profit margin, something like that. So what's nice is you're getting more performance by doing less work using Maven. Now, there are still cases where rule-based makes a ton of sense, right?
Yep.
And that's when you want to become more aggressive. You want to explicitly say, I want it to work this way. Rule-based works incredibly well there.
Yeah. Epic. Yeah. And that actually reminds me of my own rules that I have in place, where I have about 5 different Mavens, and they all literally just have minimum ROIs, and I will shift from essentially highest to lowest depending
Yeah.
on how much I want to sell. If the buy box hasn't been moving, if I haven't been selling, I just kind of trigger between those, and that actually will lead me into the next question as well, where it's like, if I have, let's say, a 27% minimum ROI, then I also have a 14% minimum ROI, and these are all just within Maven. Is there a way for me to understand that, okay, you know what, like the 27 isn't really working for me anymore? Let me now
Yeah.
just click 14. Like, do you think on the back end, is this triggering something that could potentially liven up my case of winning more of the buy box?
It could. So Maven's counterintuitive when it comes to min values. So when you're talking rule-based strategies, your mins matter a lot more. Maven, this is super interesting. We actually ran an experiment before releasing this. We took our own internal account. We had a bunch of OA stuff that we were testing with, and I took Maven to 0% ROI minimum and assigned it to everything. And what's interesting is a lot of people would assume, okay, well, therefore your prices will tank. That's not true. Because again, it's targeting the optimal price more so. It's trying to get you there as often as possible. You're still getting in the buy box, but we're trying to raise the buy box. And so what's interesting is when people say, hey, I'm using Maven and I'm using my same ROI, 30% ROI that I'm used to using with rule-based, and I'm not seeing great results. The first troubleshooting method we go to is cut that in half, go to 15%. Most of the time that will unlock more performance, because if you think about it, it's an AI. It needs some limitations to perform well, but the moment you add more and more and more constraints, the lower the performance will get. So what's interesting is, in a lot of cases, what people are doing is they're having one Maven and setting it to 0% ROI. Now, some listings will go lower than the previous min. Why? Because that's where the market is. And so that's what's interesting, but we can at least get down to where the market is and try to bring it back up.
Interesting. Okay, so just to clarify there, if I had one Maven with just like, let's say 2%, because I always want to be a little bit above my floor price, you're saying that is technically the best option because it's giving Maven more room to work with.
Yeah, it's the most flexible option is what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to try that myself.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Okay, awesome. So going into still with Maven a little bit, you touched on this already, but I want to kind of get a little deeper in terms of what's happening behind the curtain of Maven.
Yeah.
You mentioned there's a balance between winning the buy box, but also profitability. Tell us that a little bit more, and give us maybe just an idea of how much that split is, like in terms of winning the buy box or profitability.
Yeah. So the way we think about this, we were building Maven. We wanted to understand, how do we innovate using first principles, right? What is true here? Well, what is true is that we don't know how each listing is going to behave. Every listing is vastly different. I always like to say every listing is its own mini economy. That's what it feels like. So in an idealized world, what would happen? Well, in an ideal world, every one of your SKUs would have a strategy designed for it, and settings would change as the behaviors and dynamics on that listing would change. If you have 1,000 listings, you have 1,000 strategies. Good luck, right? Doesn't scale. So instead,
Yeah.
you need to take a step back and say, okay, well, let's redefine success here. Because a lot of sellers want to define success in the Repricer in one of two ways. My buy box ownership percentage went up or my sales went up. Those sound nice, but they're too simplistic and easy to hack. If I lower your prices by 20%, guess what? You got more buy box percentage and more sales. But are you happy? Of course not.
Yeah.
Why? Because profitability does matter. So instead, we flipped it. We said, okay, well, there's really two things we care about. Where do we want to go? So how do we define success? And that is the optimal price and what is true now. These are the two inputs. So that optimal price is a pretty massive equation that we calculate. We do this in real time. And it tends to be above the buy box. And if you think about that from an economics perspective, if there's a lot of competition on a listing, what happens? The price goes down. There's downward pressure.
Yeah.
So Maven's able to relieve some of that pressure. And so, okay, we know where we want to go. What is true now? This is where game theory starts to come into play. We start to understand what every one of your competition is going to do, right?
Wow.
Are they going to match you? Are they going to beat you by 2 pennies? Do I need to beat you by 4 pennies, but the other person I can match and it will rotate to me? All these crazy, complex nuances. It will understand those. It will learn those and then say, okay, cool. I know what's true. I know where we need to go. What price behaviors do I need to utilize to close the gap? And that's what we're doing. And there's something amazing about that because, again, it's not about adding more complexity to the end seller. It's about us taking on that complexity for you and making it simpler to use.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. So there's lots happening behind the curtains.
Yes. Yes.
Epic. Wow. And so that's funny. It has me thinking about what if in a perfect world, all the sellers on a listing are using Maven.
Sure.
Would that potentially be a good world because the AI will share the buy box and also maximize profitability? What do you think?
I love this question because I have to take a very academic approach to the answer.
Yeah.
The reality is it depends. But if we make this an academic exercise and say, okay, only 2 of us on the listing, we have the same min value, same cost, we're both using Aura and Maven, what would happen is we would essentially go to the optimal price together and rotate and just be happy and profitable together.
Awesome. I love that. Let's strive towards that perfect world.
Yes.
Love that. Awesome. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense with Maven. And yeah, I'm actually super excited to lower my ROI minimums and give that a shot and see how that works, especially on my newer listings. Let's talk about how Maven handles like sudden market changes, right? Like let's say competitors run out of stock, or let's say someone has a super aggressive rule-based repricer where they're always repricing down, something like that. How does Maven go around dealing with this, or potentially we want to touch into the rule based on your end as well? Just I'm curious how Aura could help me with this situation.
Yeah, one of 2 ways. So on the AI front, it really depends on the exact details of that listing and what's occurring, right? Because again, we're going to continuously utilize their behaviors to get us back to the optimal price. So what we can do is we can pull the buy box, have it rotate to us, and then pop it back up. And if somebody's using an automated repricer, what's most likely to happen is they're going to follow you back up as well. So we can still recover the buy box pretty well. On the rule-based side, it's kind of interesting because you can just say, hey, I want to match the buy box, or I want to be more aggressive with that person. That's fine. But if you utilize hyperdrive, which is a feature that only Aura has, we're able to do faster than instant repricing. That sounds so weird for me to say. Now, instant repricing does not mean instant. It means instant in our system, what we can control. But when I submit a price update to Amazon, on average, it's going to take 1.5 to 2 minutes round trip before it's confirmed and set live. So instant really means that. With hyperdrive, it's a simple toggle. You press a button and we do it for you, and we can do that full cycle in less than 10 seconds.
Wow.
But we can actually reprice faster than instant repricing. We just call it hyperdrive because there's no better term.
I like it. So yeah, it's even more instant than what most people say instant. And that way you could be a little bit ahead of the competition.
Exactly.
Epic. That's awesome. Yeah, that's something that I've tried. I've turned on a couple campaigns, and I definitely want to be able to give that a shot with more competitive SKUs, right? I'm assuming that's probably
Exactly.
what it's best for, competitive SKUs.
Exactly. You want listings where speed matters, where there's an increased amount of competition. And I don't just mean number of listings, but people actively
Yeah.
competing on price. The moment that number starts to go up, that's when you want to start looking at hyperdrive.
I got you. I got you. You know what's interesting is that I posted a example to my community a couple days ago, and I was showing them an exact reason as to why a repricer is so important, but also Maven and Aura in terms of like most of my competitors finishing their inventory and then having my buy box test for like $12 above the regular buy box and stay
Yeah.
there and be profitable, and then just really take advantage of the competitors finishing their inventory. And again, so neat and so important
Yeah.
of a repricer to have in place. But again, this is what Maven does, right? It finds that optimal price
Yeah.
for you to make profits and then still be competitive and still probably have the buy box stay on. Because if it wasn't, it would probably come back down, right? To turn the buy box on.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So it
Gotcha.
will automatically suppress buy boxes for you, which is cool.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a rule in the rule based back in that era where I would test to try to find the price where the buy box turns back on. So maybe touch on
Yeah.
that quickly. How does Maven do it? How does Maven go around finding the buy box?
Yeah. So Maven has a lot more. We have something called listing memory, and then we have AI memory. So every one of your listings, we store the most recent offer information, right? Maven stores that in a longer time horizon. So we're able to understand, oh, it got suppressed at $25. Let me try
Mm-hmm.
beneath that. So actually your dynamic max, you'll never see the value because it shifts so fast. It will factor in those things. So if we saw that it was suppressed at 25, we're going to factor that in. But at the same time, if we see that a seller gets the buy box at 26, we now need to reconsider that $25 max. And so we'll readjust it as it goes. So a lot of that stuff is actually happening on the dynamic max side of things, less so on the price side. So there's a lot of complexities happening in different components.
I got you. Okay. But just to finalize here, if I am on a listing that has a buy box that is suppressed, still Maven over
Yeah,
a rule based
totally fine.
campaign,
Yeah,
probably, right? Because Maven
totally
will
fine.
do its magic.
Exactly.
I got you. I got you. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Now, bit of a curveball here. What happens if repricing is on a listing that I've also added a coupon to? That's
Mm,
something that I've personally done. And of course, the coupon is going to add maybe an extra 5 or 10% as a discount to the customer. Does
yeah.
Aura like see the coupon? They see that I've enabled that and then potentially reprice up a little bit to take that into account, or is that not yet a thing?
We don't. So we don't look at that. We're really looking at the competitors themselves. So we're not looking at coupons.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because that is something interesting. Maybe I can create a different campaign then and add a little bit of like a 10%
Right.
increase in my minimum ROI to account for that.
You could. Yeah, you totally could.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because coupons have been something that I've been playing around with more and more. And a bit of a
Mm.
golden nugget from my end is something I've noticed with my team is when we use coupons and when we use promotions, we tend to get more of the buy box. And I'm
Interesting.
assuming that it's because Amazon makes money off of the coupons as
Yeah.
well as like paid advertising. So why wouldn't they want to put you in the buy box?
Right.
Right?
It'd be interesting to have a auto coupon generator.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like when you feel like you're not really winning the buy box anymore, it's like boom, activate coupon.
Yeah.
And then if you see like a 10-20% increase in buy box, like that's a huge
Yeah.
improvement there.
Yeah, I dig that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. Okay. So I'm going to build a rule just for coupons there. Awesome.
Nice.
Now, as I mentioned to you, Aura, some of the best UI I've seen in literally all Amazon software. And I love a good design, so I really do appreciate the time that you've taken to
Thank
actually
you.
make it look sleek and easy to use, you know. And you mentioned for like I want to kind of frame this for a first-time seller. or someone who's getting into repricing or just getting into Amazon, and like, let's say they have a product, you've already mentioned this, but I'm going to summarize it. You said when you have a listing, you just set a Maven rule, potentially lowest ROI as possible, give it that room to be
Yeah.
able to just start testing, right? And then, so talk to me maybe about the second step again. The first rule is turn on Maven.
Yeah.
Second step, if you realize maybe after a few days that it's not working for you, what should someone do?
So yeah, that life cycle is what we're talking about, right? And we have if you go to help.goor.com, we have an article on this. We call it the 3 core strategies that we think everybody should have. So that first one is Maven. The second one is the buy box targeting strategy. So we, everything past Maven here is going to be rule based. So this is where we start to say, I actively want to target the buy box. I want to at least match. I might want to, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, you can beat the price, but at least match it. That's what we want to do. We want to start focusing more on velocity. And then that third strategy is really a liquidation strategy, in which case we're willing to go down to 0% ROI without AI, right? So we can actually go there. And we're willing to just break even to get our capital back. And we're going to be more aggressive. We're definitely going to be repricing below the buy box in some way, shape, or form.
Cool. So that third rule was also rule based, not Maven?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So Maven
Okay.
will not liquidate. It's not designed to do so. So if you're like, Dillon, I want to move all my inventory, don't put Maven on it. It's not designed to tank your prices.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. So Maven, and then rule based, more aggressive, try to win the buy box. And then third would be liquidate, try to have like a minimal ROI and just try to sell out.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, good. Now, let's touch on how often someone should be looking at their repricer, because this is something I've learned from bigger sellers, and I've realized that going over your repricer is not necessarily, or just setting up your repricer is not a set and forget, right?
Right.
As much as with Maven, it has, and it is going more towards that, which is great because it's less work for me. But I have a habit now of at least checking all of my listings once a week on a Sunday, let's say, to just make sure that my products are selling, and that if not, I should change something. Maybe, like you said, go from step 1 to step 2 and be a little more aggressive. What's your input on that? What do you think? Maybe you've spoken to bigger sellers as well. What do you think is a good agenda or practice for someone to review and make sure that everything is going according to plan?
Most sellers will do it about once a week. I don't think that's enough. And there's also this mental hurdle where you should liquidate it, but you don't, right? So here's the thing. We walk through that 3 core strategy kind of framework. Most sellers will sit down once a week and do exactly the same process you're talking about. They'll look and say, okay, it's not moving fast enough, or it's getting older. Let me go ahead and make changes. So we're big fans of automation. Right now, we have a feature called workflows, and you can set it up to say, hey, whenever a new listing comes in, I want to assign my default strategy, that could be Maven, and enable repricing. If you're using an integration, we're pulling in your costs. Basically, you ship inventory, we start to reprice it without you in the loop. Great. But how do you manage the life cycle itself? Like, how do you do that? And that's what we recently released, which is something called an age of inventory workflow. Most sellers do the exact same process every single time. Say, hey, if my age of inventory is greater than 90 days, I want to start liquidating it. Or if it's older than 60 days, I want to become more aggressive. Great. But why work in the repricer when you can work on the repricer? That's our philosophy here. So how do you automate 90% of the administration of managing your repricer? This is how you do it. So with age of inventory workflows, you're able to go in and explicitly say, okay, well, if my highest age of inventory for any SKU is less than 30 days, assign Maven. If it's between 31 and 60 days, I want to become more aggressive, assign strategy 2. That's that buy box targeting strategy. If it's greater than 90 days, I want to actually move it to liquidation. Now, here's what's cool. That's moving forward. But most of the time, you're shipping in multiple shipments. So your age of inventory buckets are all over the place. So you don't necessarily just want to say, well, it's over 90, I want to liquidate. Well, what if you only had 2 that were greater than 90, and then the others are in 30? So the way we have these built out, it will actually revert back. And so instead of checking this once a week, you can have this trigger once an hour. You can say once an hour, once every 3 hours, once a day, totally up to you. Look at all my listings and apply the correct strategy. I could become more aggressive. I could become less aggressive. And so now we're going from this world where I'm optimizing once a week to it is self-optimizing every hour. I always come
Wow.
back to this: what percentage of the opportunity are you claiming? And so when
Mm-hmm.
you don't check these things enough, you're missing out on a lot. Now,
Yeah.
you make money when you buy inventory, not when you're selling it, right? And so our whole job is, how do we create a world where all the selling that needs to occur, we handle all that for you, so you
Yeah.
get to free up more time to focus on sourcing more inventory.
Yeah. Love that. Wow. Wow. That's available right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. You mentioned that it will self-optimize. So I just wanted to clarify there. What is it doing to self-optimize exactly?
Yeah. So it's shifting between those different strategies, right? So what you're doing when you sit down once a week to go through all your inventory to
Yeah.
understand what strategy should I change to, you're optimizing your listings is what you're doing.
Yes.
So imagine
Yes.
taking that process that you're doing manually
Mm-hmm.
and codifying it, so turning it into a process, into a workflow, and now having it done once an hour,
Yeah.
24/7.
And could that be based off of like X amount of units sold in the last few days, or like what's it based off of? Like what could trigger it?
Yeah, so the way that trigger works is we're actually looking at either the number of units or percentage of units in certain buckets. So what's nice is you have control over what it looks like. So you could
Yeah.
say, okay, if 25% of my inventory is over 90 days, that's when I want to liquidate. But the moment it's
Yeah.
back down and that's no longer true, go back to Maven. Totally fine. The
Got
way
it.
we kind of set the best practice here is if at least one unit is over X period,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I want to liquidate or change my strategy. And we
I
have
got you.
docs on it too with best practices. So if you go to
Yeah.
help.goor.com, search age of inventory, you should see
Mm-hmm.
2 articles there that break down exactly how to build this. What's
Yeah.
nice is the complexity of what it's doing is high, but the way you build it is actually incredibly simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is a relatively new feature. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about a week old now. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I saw an email, and so this is definitely also on my to-do list
Yep.
to add. So yeah, I got to get deeper into that. But that pretty much sums up my technical questions. It seems like you've passed with flying colors.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that was super, super useful. Why don't you tell me a little bit about some upcoming features or innovations with Aura that we can all expect within the next few months?
Yeah, you mentioned you love our design. We are redesigning it again. We think it's going to be even better than it currently is. That will
Awesome.
also usher us into a new era. We're looking at and building for Walmart a native repricer right now.
Hmm.
So I think the future is really multi-channel. That's from everything I see. I think that's the future. So we're really focused on that. And then we have a massive stealth project that I cannot talk about, but I am very excited for.
Sounds exciting. Yeah. When do you think we'll hear about the stealth project?
Probably closer to end of Q1, maybe Q2, but it's
Okay.
software. So take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. Right. Epic, epic. Well, again, thanks so much, Dylan. This was great. Um, I'm sure I'll see you at a few conferences coming up. 2025 has just begun, and the conferences are probably in motion already.
Oh, yeah.
What are a couple conferences that we can catch you in?
Yeah, so we'll be at the Miami Seller Conference, we'll be at the Proven Conference, and AMZ United are the 3 major ones that we will be going to.
Yeah.
I assume there's going to be a few more we'll pop into as well.
Awesome. Okay. I'll make sure to be there and see you. And for anyone watching, if you're serious about building this business and really getting into the community, these are the conferences you have to go to. That way we can all be together, connect, network, as well as learn trade secrets. So, Dylan, thanks so much. This was super useful. I'm sure everyone watching has learned a lot as well. So, thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
There you have it. I hope that was valuable. I know that I personally realized some things that I need to do in my own business that I'm going to implement very, very soon. I want you to now, if you still have some time, go and check out this video because it really talks about my 2025 strategy and how I'm doing something completely different and even going to be talking about something completely different to take my business from 100K to 200K a month. Right? Even for beginners, this is a great way for beginners to really just get into the game. But if you're doing anywhere below 50K a month, this strategy is absolutely something you need to learn about. So go check it out.